Imagine the night Loki took Odin's hand and cut his palm with the blade, their blood falling together. In that moment, a trickster entered the inner circle of Asgard, not as guest, but as brother. The gods welcomed him, desperate for his cunning. And soon that cunning was everywhere, securing treasures, winning wagers, deceiving giants. But every story carried shadows. The horse born of trickery, the serpent born of transgression, the secrets born of lies. This is not only the tale of Loki, it's the story of how one oath binds the gods to brilliance and to ruin. Why would Odin, the god who could stretch his gaze beyond the horizons of worlds, choose to bind himself in blood to one whose very nature was tricks and shifting forms? The question lingers like smoke. You'd think wisdom would keep its hands clean of chaos, and yet here we find the father of all cutting his palm beside Loki, letting their blood mingle, tying himself to the one figure who never wore a steady face. In the old stories, blood oaths were not casual pledges. They were carved into flesh and sealed with pain, meant to last as long as breath. Picture it, two figures, one tall and grave, the other sly-eyed and restless, slicing open the barrier of skin, clasping hands so the blood joined. That was no ritual of courtesy. It was binding. It was an announcement to the gods and to the 9 worlds that Loki, son of no great house, belonged beside the king of Asgard. We can imagine how shocking that must have felt. Loki, an outsider, raised at once to the highest table. And yet, with that single act, Odin gave him a seat not just near his throne, but within his councils. No longer a shadow at the gates, Loki was now brother. The gods who had mocked his antics had to accept him as family. And family, in myth as much as in life, means obligation. When one bled, both bled. When one reaped glory, both shared in it. Already we sense the tension, the solemn and the shifting bound together, order clasping hands with uncertainty. Think of it as a fire being pulled into a hearth. It gives warmth, it cooks the meal, it lights the night, but it can also leap, scatter sparks, and burn the hall itself. In the same way, Loki's wit lit paths Odin's power could not walk. Where brute force was a blunt hammer, Loki was the lockpick. His tongue moved swifter than spears, and his schemes could tie giants into knots that no shield wall could withstand. For example, the dwarves contest tells us much. A wager Loki spun almost took his very life, for when he lost, the dwarves wanted his head. Only a cunning twist of words saved him. Still, from that peril came treasures. The golden hair, the ship that could fold into a pouch, and above all, Mjolnir, the hammer that shielded Asgard for ages. So here we see the trade born of the oath. Where Odin sat, Loki's risky games produced gifts beyond price. Without him, the hammer may never have been forged at all. But this reliance deepened the bond into something more fragile. When Asgard's strength outpaced its wisdom, the gods needed Loki. When walls had to be built, when cunning was demanded, his ideas shaped the solution. The barrier around their world rose because of his bargains. The treasures glittered because of his tricks. Again and again, it was his cunning filling the cracks in their plans. Yet behind every marvel lay a shadow. The hammer was mighty, yes, but it was also flawed, the handle shortened by Loki's interference. The walls were built, but the cost stirred quarrels. Each gain sang with triumph while carrying an undertone of warning, as though chaos had been woven right into the thread of fate. This was the irony Odin chose, to take a mind that forced the world to change, even if it meant change carried sharp edges. So what does this show us? Odin was not choosing safety. He was not binding himself to loyalty or certainty. He was binding himself to flux, to the force that unsettles and reshapes. For good or for harm, Loki was now indispensable. Yet if the oath explains why Odin trusted a trickster, another riddle rises. Why did the gods return to Loki's counsel again and again, even knowing the storms that followed him? Imagine treasures too great for any god to refuse. Gifts so dazzling they seemed to solve every problem, yet each one carried within it the seed of ruin. That is the rhythm of Loki's presence at Odin's side. Whenever brute strength or solemn vows of honor failed Asgard, it was to Loki that the gods turned. His fox-like mind and shifting form could slide through locks no hammer could smash. They knew the danger of calling him, but when the halls trembled with threats, it was often their only choice. And each time, they weighed the cost only after the marvel had already been claimed. Look at the pattern. Walls too high to raise, bargains with builders tangled in trickery, a goddess stolen away, her youth granting apples gone with her, wings of a hawk and a clever ruse to bring her back. The gods faced binds like knots tied too tightly to ever pull loose until the trickster breathed on them and the knot became a thread. Pause and imagine that scene for a moment. A council chamber of gods, silent and frustrated, until the thin smile of Loki breaks into the quiet. He does not offer swords. He offers schemes. And as always, who else has an answer? But here is the tension. Shape-shifting was not harmless mischief. It meant the slipping of boundaries no one else dared to cross. When he became a mare to lure away Svadilfari, the stallion of the giant builder, it was trickery spun deep into his very body. From that union came Sleipnir, the gray steed with 8 legs who would become Odin's loyal mount. A creature like no other, untiring, swift enough to ride between worlds. This was no minor prize, yet even that miracle was born of strangeness, a god fathering or mothering a beast. The marvel was clear, but so too was the unease. Another time, when Idun was stolen and her golden apples lost, the gods withered, growing old and brittle. Loki had been the cause of the loss, but he also became the rescuer. Borrowing the feathers of Freya, he flew as a falcon, seized Idun, and brought her home. The apples returned, the gods renewed. Triumph again. And yet what this means is still complicated. Without Loki, disaster might never have struck. Without Loki, disaster could never have been undone. His chaos supplied both the poison and the cure. For Odin, this bond became a cycle without release. Think of it like a debt that is paid only by borrowing again. No matter how many times Loki's devising brought glory, the cost was always waiting on the other side. Sleipnir was magnificent, but Loki's other offspring were monsters. The wolf Fenrir, the serpent Jörmungandr, the being Hel who ruled the dead. Each born of him, each destined for ruin. The same wellspring that gave Odin his steed poured forth the horrors that would one day close the circle of the gods. Every gift Loki delivered was doubled with a shadow. That rhythm never broke. His brilliance never came clean. It always bore a hidden fee. And Odin, wise as he was, could not escape needing him, because when only trickery answered the riddle, who else could speak? It was a reliance that weakened even as it saved, binding the gods to a dangerous dreamer. And the costs do not stay small. They grow. They shape the tale's center. What begins with shortened hammer handles, an uneasy offspring, grows toward death itself, toward Baldur, most beloved, undone by Loki's hand. So the answer to why the gods keep turning to him becomes plain. They have no choice. When nothing else works, Loki works. But his answers always lean toward chaos, drawing Asgard closer to the fire. And this cycle cannot last, because chaos does not stay contained. It spreads, and Loki's oath-bound brilliance soon tears the order of Asgard apart. Loki's oath with Odin was never about safety. It was about binding change itself into the walls of Asgard. By clasping hands, Odin invited both brilliance and danger into the very heart of the gods' order. Every triumph that followed carried a shadow, every marvel a hidden cost. Think of your own stories, or even your life. Where do we hold close what dazzles us, even when it risks undoing us? Brilliance and danger often arrive together, woven too tightly to separate. Loki enters as brother, births wonders and monsters alike, and leaves us with the question, was betrayal fate or the price of blood?